Welcome to episode 6, series 4 of Diabetes Health Matters. My name is Dr Joan St John and I'm the host of Diabetes Health Matters. Diabetes Health Matters is sponsored by Eli Lilly and Company and Menarini, although they have no input into the content of this webinar series. Now, in our previous episode, we spoke about the intersection between menopause, changes of hormones, and diabetes, the different types of diabetes, and how that can affect women, and particularly racialized women. In this episode, we're going to delve more into what you can do about it if you're living with diabetes and you're living through the menopause. In a previous episode in this series, we've spoken about lifestyle medicine, and we're probably going to use very familiar themes from that way of looking at health in describing what you can do about the menopause. Once again, we have our two wonderful, phenomenal speakers, both multi-award winning GPs with special interests in the menopause, women's health, health advocacy, health equity, and just incredible ladies. So I'm very, very pleased to welcome back Dr Itunu Johnson-Sogbetun and Dr Aziza Sesay. So we're going to have a little bit of a recap of our previous episode where we spoke through those hormone changes, how that can affect your blood glucose levels, how that can affect your diabetes depending on what type of diabetes you're living with, or if you're at risk of developing diabetes. And we're going to go on to spend more of this episode talking about what you can do about it. Remember, we're also going to talk about things like hormonophobia. And if you don't know what that is, you will do by the end of this episode, because you would have had 2 episodes in which we've spoken about it. So I want to welcome both these two expert speakers back and hand over to them as they tell us more about what you can do about living with the menopause, living with hormone changes, living with diabetes. Thank you. So we're picking up where we left off last time, and we're going to briefly run through the menopause and the hormone changes, but what we're really going to focus on in this episode is what you can do about it, what is within your power to help you thrive through these changes. So welcome back, Dr Itunu and Dr Aziza.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. In order for us to understand how it all works and then how we can help ourselves, we need to understand the basics. So the most important thing is we spoke about what happens during the reproductive years, the hormonal changes, what happens during perimenopause, menopause, and the postmenopause, and the symptoms that are associated with the menopause. If you look at the next slide, we touched on how the dips in the estrogen, the progesterone, the testosterone levels can cause the symptoms associated. Similarly, what happens with the cortisol and the insulin shifts. We touched on different symptoms and mentioned that there are 75 different symptoms associated with menopause. And we delved into the different impacts of menopause on the different types of diabetes. So the type 1, type 2 diabetes, how then the shift can go from pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes because of the changes that are associated with menopause. And most importantly, we spoke about the impact of menopause on Black women and how it can present in Black women, how different it is in Black women, and how severe it can be as well. Now, touching on all of those things, we want to give you the tools to manage it, because that's what's most important. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Itunu.
Right. So we're going to talk about 4 pillars. And the very first one is nourishing your body. And I think this is really important because a lot of the time when we hear this, particularly as Black people, we feel it comes with a lot of judgment. And I felt this myself, so I know what it's like. And I think I want to say this with a lot of love, right? This is not about judgment. This is about loving your body with the food that you eat. And this is about recognizing that the food that you eat makes a huge difference to how your body responds to these menopausal changes. Now, we've already talked about the fact that some of these hormonal changes will make you gain abdominal fat because of the hormonal shifts. But is there anything you can do with what you're eating to counteract it? So I think very first thing is about the type of carbohydrates that you're eating. Now, I've mentioned about this eat the rainbow, because it's so important that you're eating lots of different colors of food and lots of fiber, lots of different fruits and vegetables. But in terms of the carbohydrates that you eat, you want to eat whole grain carbohydrates, things that don't immediately turn to sugar. So the more complex carbohydrates, so things like brown rice, things like brown pasta, if you want to have pasta, and things like, lentils and legumes, carbohydrates that don't break down so quickly, as opposed to things like white bread, white rice, white sugar. They immediately turn to sugar into your bloodstream, and that then makes it more likely that firstly they're going to be converted into fat that goes around your abdomen, but also it's more likely that it's going to increase insulin resistance. And for those who are living with type 1 diabetes and need insulin, or for type 2 diabetes patients who are requiring additional insulin, that can mean that it increases what you need. And so the type of carbohydrates that you eat is really, really important, but also the portion sizes. So for many of us in our culture, so whether it's sort of African or Caribbean, we are used to eating, a lot of carbohydrates and a smaller amount of protein on the plate, and we need to kind of reverse it. I often talk about a fist size of carbohydrate on the plate, lots more protein, lots more fruits and vegetables, and of course, the healthy fats. Now, protein is so important because it protects muscle and boosts metabolism. It's so, so, so important in this time of life. And so what you want to do is eat lean protein, so things like chicken, fish. Be careful with red meat, and that's because of the added sort of bad fats, the bad fats that are associated with red meat, but healthy fats as well. So things like salmon, nuts, olive oil, they can be really, really helpful to reduce inflammation, and means that you have a balanced diet. So when you're looking at your plates, you want to make sure that carbohydrates are important, so please eat your carbohydrates, but no more than a fist size in terms of portion. Protein, lots of protein on the plate, lots of fruits and vegetable with a bit of healthy fats as well, so that you have a balanced diet. And remember, our cultural food is not bad. And I think that's so, so crucial. As Africans and Caribbeans, we have the food that we enjoy. It's the food of our ancestors, it's the food of our people. But can we eat it in a way that acknowledges and respects our heritage, but also respects the fact that we want to have a healthy lifestyle? Absolutely, we can. And one of the things I talk about is the oils that we use. So, for example, a lot of African food is cooked with palm oil, which is solid at room temperature. So I often talk about there's healthier palm oils and that you can get, or you can use olive oil as a replacement. For example, as well, we have our hard foods that we eat. So again, it's about portion control. Can we make it with whole flour and things that are, less refined, So like, say, for example, we have really great foods like, with beans, with vegetables and things like that. But we need to make sure that they're rich in protein, that they are rich in healthy oils. So we can eat our food. And I think that's one of the things that I find that we sometimes say, oh, eat a Mediterranean diet, but we're not Mediterranean. So we want to be able to eat our food, but in a healthy way. And we need to be careful about the salts that we put in our food as well, because we know that as Black people, we're very high risk of hypertension. By the age of 40, 50% of Black people would have had hypertension, which adds to the risk with diabetes and pre-diabetes and our cardiovascular health risk. So again, be careful with the amount of salt you're putting in your food. season with natural seasonings like garlic, ginger, bay leaves, rather than using mixed seasonings that might have a lot of salt or might have monosodium glutamate, which is basically like salt on speed. I'm just going to hand over to Aziza if there's anything you would like to add that I've missed out.
No, I thought you've done that really beautifully. What I do want to say is that often when we think about our community, yes, absolutely what you've said, we eat a lot of rice. We do put a lot of rice on our plates and then everything else. But it is about changing. It's just swapping. It's not saying that you stop. You swap and you portion control. And just as you mentioned in terms of our culture and what we eat, actually, a lot of what we put on our food is quite healthy in terms of the variation of, say, leaves. So I'm Sierra Leonean originally. We have a lot of spinach in our diet. We have some the leaves called crane crane. We even have cassava leaves. But just as you said, it is about what we're putting in, what type of oils that we're using. Because with a lot of the foods that I've grown up with, again, as you mentioned, we put a lot of palm oil in it. So swapping the oils and then looking at the alternatives, portion control. But we don't need to completely change our diets. Because that's what society is saying. It's all about recognizing what's good and what's not. And the more we put on our plate, healthy things on our plates in terms of the vegetables on the side and having more of those, it does make us feel fuller quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we always say, there is nothing wrong with our foods. And I really liked what you've said. It's about addition, not restriction. It's not about you can't have this, you can't have that, you can't do the other. Think about how you can do it more smartly. Think about how you can do it more healthily. Keep your traditional foods, but how can you make it more health giving for you as an individual? And the other thing I really love is fibre. I don't think we talk enough about it. It is so important. And I think this is one of the things that can sometimes happen, one of the changes that can happen to women's bodies as they go through the menopause, the perimenopause. Their bowel habit changes. And, we don't talk a lot about that. If you're having the whole grains, so within your carbohydrates, if you're having lots of fibre, it is going to help your gut health. And we're just recognising more and more how important that is. What else can we do, ladies?
So the next thing, again, is pillar 2, movement as medicine. Now, for me, this again can come as judgment so I'm saying this with a lot of love, right? And it is about what we do and trying to keep the barrier of entry as low as possible. Tie it to joy. And that's why I've put there daily joy. Okay? Because cardiovascular exercises are really, really important. But I've called it daily joy rather than, cardiovascular exercises because it's so important that what you're doing for your heart health is tied with enjoyment. And you can start low and go slow and build up. Whether it's walking or running or dancing with the kids or dancing by yourself or swimming, whatever you're doing to improve your heart health, do it. Do it with other people, go for park runs, go for a walk with your friends. Whatever you do something that is sustainable and that you will enjoy. And then we know, we mentioned in the previous episode about strength and resistance exercises, which is so important because we talked about the muscle loss that happens in the menopause, but we also talked about that fat distribution change. And there is no better way to fight that change than to increase your muscle mass because it fights back by altering your metabolism and making your metabolism better. So as the menopause is trying to make your metabolism worse, if you're building up muscle and movement with strength, you are fighting back and building that muscle to make your metabolism better. And so I know it can be challenging. You don't have to go to the gym. You can get some resistance bands or some weights at home, some bells, kettlebells, whatever you feel like you can do. You can watch videos on YouTube that are free. You don't have to get a gym membership. You can do swimming, you can do water aerobics, which is a really great way of doing for those who have joint aches and pains, because we know that sometimes as we get older, we might have developed different joint aches and pains, and sometimes the menopause can cause joint aches and pains as well. When you do resistance exercise and water, it reduces the load on the joints and can make it a lot easier. So you're still doing your resistance. And then the flexibility that's so important. So that's yoga, stretching, Pilates, Tai Chi, whatever it is, because our balance worsens with the menopause and as we get older. So we want to increase that flexibility, increase that balance. So what you're doing is focusing on metabolism and function and not really worrying about calories. It's about joy. It's about, again, loving your body. This is part of self-compassion. And please don't feel it as a judgment. If you can only manage 10 minutes twice a week, start there. If you can only manage 5 minutes once a week, start there. Whatever you can do, just start slow and build up. Dr. Aziza, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, absolutely. That was brilliant. That's amazing. So if we go by what the NHS recommends, I love how you've detailed this in a manner of joy. So the NHS says that we should aim to do at least 150 minutes of exercise a week, okay? And they say try and spread this over the week, whether it's 30 minutes over 5 days. And just as Dr. Itunu stressed, it doesn't have to be something crazy, drastic, or extremely strenuous. Do what works for you and what's comfortable for you and build slowly. And there's so many different, some people do something called couch to 5K where they build themselves to getting, you don't have to run to 5K, but you build slowly and you listen to your body and you give yourself compassion in when you're doing it. And just like she mentioned, you don't have to join the gym. You can simply watch different YouTube videos. Even if you're not going to use resistance bands or weights, if you have kids or grandkids, I tell you, they are weights. So if you're doing the lifting and manual handling, be very careful when you're doing lifting as well, because sometimes we forget to squat. We put the weight, all the weight on our back, and then we cause ourselves back injuries. But I'm saying that it doesn't have to. You don't have to buy these fancy equipment. Some people use water bottles, in their homes, or just whatever you have to do, or even using your own body weight, our own body weight itself to do the strength training exercises. So the NHS says that we need to try and do at least twice a week, as mentioned there. Try and do that. And yeah, group exercises. So there's so many different community groups. You mentioned park runs. There are community group exercises that you can, and often a lot of them are free. You can go to your GP and we can prescribe exercise for you as well, to try again to build your muscle, to build your energy levels. And know that just walking is probably sometimes all you need. I know someone who lost all of her weight just from walking. She just walked regularly every day where she could. And walking outdoors is I know it's hard in this country when it's raining all the time. Last week it was raining, but just being outdoors gives you that natural light, the nature, the positivity from that. And then you get the endorphins and the happy hormone boosts, as well as all of the positivities that's associated.
Absolutely. And I mean, I love what you've put there, movement as medicine. And when we think about medicine, we think about taking it once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. And I think you have to think about some physical activity once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. The issue is just to do something, to move a bit more than you were moving before. Because as we learnt previously, in terms of the insulin resistance that can occur with those hormone changes during the menopause, it's so important you can improve that insulin resistance by things like the strength training, the flexibility, the aerobic training. I just wanted to add another couple of things. In terms of the strength training, some women can be put off when they see those weights and they think, I'm not going to go and build my muscle and look like a bodybuilder. But actually, you can do low weights. You can do lots of repetitions of low weights. And your low weights could be cans out of your cupboard. So it doesn't even have to be, the weights that we would normally associate with the gym. The joy, it's so important that whatever you do, you enjoy it. And that 150 minutes that Dr. Aziza spoke about, break it down. Do a 10-minute here, a 10-minute there, 5-minute if you can, and before you know it, you'll have built up to the 150 minutes in the week. Dr. Aziza, you wanted to say something else?
You literally just stole the words out of my mouth. So there's something called exercise snacking that they talk about, which essentially is that it's not exercise and eating snacks, even though that would be great, but it is literally snacking on exercise. So you're just doing short bouts. So for instance, we currently live in a very sedentary life. We have a sedentary lifestyle. A lot of us are sitting where we're working. We're at our desk, especially if I talk about me as a GP. I'm at my desk for hours on end before I get to stand up. But it is just remembering to take those little breaks, even if it's a couple of minutes. So you do a few squats here, or you go for a walk here, or just doing something for a few minutes at a time. Because often you think about exercise, you're like, oh, I need to section off at least 30 minutes to an hour just doing exercise. But making it more realistic, where you're doing small bouts, as just as Dr. Jones said, eventually it all adds up and it makes a change.
And if you're living with type 1 diabetes, or you're living with type 2 diabetes, and you're going to undertake to move more than you were doing before, then have a word with your healthcare professional, because it might affect things like certainly your blood glucose. We know it will affect that in a positive way, but it may affect your requirement for certain medications that you're using currently. So it's always a good idea to have a word with your healthcare professional. What else can we do, ladies? What else can we do?
Absolutely. So we've said nourish your body. We've said sit less and move more. And now we're going to talk about the mind and hormones. So we talked about what you put in your mouth. One of the things I think is really important is thinking about what we put in our mind. What are we consuming? What is in our mind? So firstly, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we consume in terms of the 24-hour news cycle, social media, being constantly contactable 24 hours a day via mobile phones and emails. All of that can be quite a lot. And then, of course, we have all the tasks that we need to do as midlife women. And for many of us, we are in a situation where we are working full-time whilst looking after younger family members, and sometimes also older family members. So you might be looking after 2 generations, sometimes even 3 generations, whilst working, and then having to deal with this constant barrage of brain noise from all these mobile phones and the 24-hour news cycle and social media. So you need to really think around your mental load. That is a word that we use quite a lot. It just means all the things you're carrying in your brain. Now, as women, we're often doing a lot of the thinking for society in addition to the doing. So sometimes, if you have a partner, they might help with the doing, but not necessarily with the thinking, particularly if it's a male partner. We joke sometimes. But it just so happens that we're really good at doing multitasking and thinking as women. Now, the challenge is that when we are losing estrogen, we talked about the brain fog, we talked about the mood swings, we talked about the sleep disruption, and we're going to talk about sleep in a minute, but that can make it so much more difficult to multitask and manage. So please ask for help. Feel confident that if you need help, ask for it. And if you can afford it, sometimes outsource things if you can. And I know that can be difficult for some people, but some people have more resources. And, share the thinking tasks, and then get the help that you need. Bunch up with community, with friends, with local people, so that you can all support each other and you can help each other, because it's so important, particularly if you're a single parent. And, we know that in the Black community, many women are single. Rely on other community members and a friendship network, because you can't do it alone, to get more support at this time. Now, I often talk about the mental load, about eliminating what don't I need to be doing, delegating, and I already talked about trying to share the load, asking for help. And then the third thing that I talk about is facilitating, and I learned this from an occupational therapist. Facilitating is, how can you make things more streamlined, so I don't have to waste my brain cells on it, and it just frees up a bit of space in my brain. So it's all of the things like that you can do to reduce that mental load. But it's also about sleeping, nervous system regulation. What we talked about, the sleep being so important for blood sugar regulation, and you're aiming for 6 to 8 hours. You need to sleep, and we know that menopause can impact sleep. So if you are struggling with sleep, you might need treatment for that, and you need to go and see your GP. One of the treatments that might be suggested is hormone replacement therapy, and that can help with sleep. But there's other things that people try. There's anecdotal evidence, it's not strong, that sometimes people try magnesium and they find it helpful. There are other tools that may be used in this time. So some people may use melatonin, again, for a short period of time to try and regulate their sleep. But it's really about sleep hygiene as well. Are you taking screens to bed? Are you drinking a lot of caffeine after midday? Are you drinking a lot of alcohol? Because some people feel like, oh, alcohol helps me sleep, but actually it makes you drowsy, but it causes disrupted sleep. And one of the other things we have to recognize is that obstructive sleep apnea is more common in our community and can make diabetes worse. And it's more common in patients who have diabetes and in patients who are overweight. And that can disrupt sleep. If you don't know what obstructive sleep apnea is, it's basically where your sleep is affected, and you are basically almost like you're stopping breathing in your sleep. And it's a condition, and there's treatment. Again, if you're having a lot of sleep problems and lots of things have been tried and it's not working, it might be worth going for a sleep study, because menopause puts you at increased risk of obstructive sleep apnea, as well as all of the other things that we've talked about. Now, Dr. Aziza mentioned about nature and how nature is restorative. I can't share this enough. Nature helps to calm down the nervous system. So spending time in green spaces, and of course you can add physical activity and movement to that, but even just being in green spaces alone. So if you're spending all your time indoors, just going from work to home, and not spending any time outdoors, it's going to impact. And so you definitely want to try and spend time in green spaces. I try and make the barrier very low. I know in this country it rains a lot. What I've done is I've invested in the kind of shoes that will help me, so like boots, wellies, and I've got a nice coat that I can go out in the rain and clear my head. So sometimes when I'm stressed, where the temptation is like, oh, do you want to, get a bar of chocolate, or do you want to, I have now decided that, like, sometimes I still get it wrong, but to the best of my ability, I will try and say, okay, let me just go for, even if it's a 5-10 minute walk, just get some fresh air. And even if it's raining, I've even learned to just love that feeling of being outside, when it's gently raining and I'm just walking and just getting that restoration of just being outdoors. Now, we also talked about seeking support. You don't have to do this alone. Sometimes you might need therapy as well, because a lot of trauma comes to the forefront in the menopause. That's why I said estrogen has been our coping mechanism, as I mentioned in the previous episode. So when we lose the estrogen, sometimes we're struggling to cope, and hidden traumas, things like infertility, miscarriage. We already talked about in the previous episode, being unexpectedly single, divorce, previous relationship, emotional abuse, domestic abuse, all the different traumas that we might have experienced, minority stress, all the things that we might have experienced in the past, they might come to the forefront, and you might need therapy to process them. So there's so much that you can do with your mind to help your body and to help your hormones, to reduce that cortisol level, to reduce that stress level, to make yourself feel better, in addition to the pillars that we've spoken about before. Aziza, I'm just going to ask if you want to add anything.
But I think it's just important that we don't underestimate the power of the mind. The mind and the body are connected. So if our mind isn't right, it will have an impact overall on our hormones, on our symptoms, and how we manage things. But you've covered every single aspect. There's not much to add, really.
I absolutely agree. And pillar 4 then is awareness and monitoring.
So I think particularly for patients who are diabetic, if you are type 1 diabetes, type 1 diabetic, you're used to monitoring your sugars. And if you're on certain medications for your type 2 diabetes, then you're also used to monitoring your sugars. Otherwise, if you've just got type 2 diabetes and you're not on medication that needs monitoring, you're used to getting your HbA1c done sort of regularly. Now, what you need to be doing is really keeping an eye on your body. So Dr. Joan mentioned that if you're changing things in your lifestyle, or if you're getting more symptoms, you might need some adjustments in your medication. So how will you know? You need to track. And that's why we've got this little journal there. And it doesn't have to be a physical book. You could do it online. You could create there's apps that you can use, but you can also use your phone to just like make notes and keep a track of what is happening with my sugars, what's happening with my symptoms, what's happening with my hormones, and get an idea of what the impact is. What's happened when I've started doing this movement to my blood sugar control, what's happened when I'm changing my eating, what's happened when I'm getting more hot flashes. So it could be a positive or negative change to your sugars. So listen to your hunger cues and body signals. So you want to make sure that you are looking after your body. You don't want to get hypos, because it's important as well. Yes, we don't want your sugar high, but you also don't want your sugar too low. So this is a time when you have to really get intimate with your body. Get to understand, because the changes are happening and each person is an individual. So you need to know what's happening with your body. So monitor your weight, monitor your blood pressure, your abdominal circumference, as Dr. Joan talked about, monitor your blood sugar, get your regular HbA1cs, and just be aware of what's happening in your body so that you can map things out. You can go to your healthcare professional when there's any issues, and you can make sure that you are everything is monitored and getting the best care that you require. Dr. Aziza, do you want to add anything to this?
It's just so important that you know your numbers, sorry. Make sure that you know your numbers. So as you just mentioned, know what your blood pressure is, know what the blood sugar is doing, know what your sleep pattern is like, and also know your normal in terms of the symptoms that you're experiencing. So know what your new normal is, and be aware of the tiny changes, and always, always, always go see your doctor. Because the whole point of knowing your normal is then you'll know when something isn't right or when something has changed, and then you can pick it up early. And we shouldn't just put down everything to the conditions that we have. So whether it be you have PCOS or you have diabetes and you think, oh, I'm probably getting these symptoms because of my underlying conditions. No, actually, it might be a sign that something else is going on. So I cannot stress enough the importance of doing the symptom diary, knowing what's going on, spotting the pattern, and then if you notice a change, going to see your doctor as soon as possible so that you can nip it in the bud. As I said in the previous episode, early intervention is a difference between life and death.
And so often we do for everybody else, we don't do for ourselves. We're not used to concentrating on our own selves or our own health. Again, we can't stress enough how important it is at this point in your life cycle to monitor what's happening, because things are going to change. They're going to be different to what they were before. So those are the 4 pillars. Thank you so much, ladies. What else can we as healthcare professionals then add to that? Because those are the pillars on which your health stands, and what we add is just on top of that.
Absolutely. So we have spent a lot of time talking about the pillars, and I spend a lot of time talking about the lifestyle, because as you say, they are really the foundation. But of course, one of the things that can be really helpful in the menopause is hormone replacement therapy. It's not the only treatment. We have non-hormonal treatments as well, but hormone replacement therapy is the best evidence-based treatment for people experiencing symptoms of perimenopause and the menopause. Now, of course, there are some women, it's a small group of women who can't have HRT for lots of different reasons. So maybe they have a hormone sensitive cancer, or they have some kind of medical problem that precludes them from getting HRT. But for the vast majority of women, HRT is safe and an evidence-based treatment for the menopause. But of course, with our community, and this is why I've put the word hormonophobia and I've put it in inversion marks, is that there's a lot of fear around hormones, and the fear is, oh, hormones are dangerous, they cause cancer and they should be avoided, or even hormones are not for Black women, they're not for us. And I want to tell the truth, which is that HRT can improve insulin sensitivity and can reduce symptoms and improve quality of life in the menopause. Now, everybody doesn't have to have HRT, and I think I need to be really clear about that. But for those who are really suffering with their symptoms, it can really be life-changing and quality of life improving. I think it's really important to understand that. Now, we talk about the risks. Now, a lot of the fear is based on outdated information, because we know that for the vast majority of women, the benefits of HRT for bone health, there is even some limited evidence that it might improve heart health, although that's still being researched. And certainly for the younger women, the women who are under 45, we would strongly recommend it because it can potentially improve these things, the heart health, certainly bone health for everyone, but heart health in that group cohort, and possibly brain health in that cohort as well, but that's still being researched. So there's health benefits potentially from HRT, in addition to the quality of life improvements and the symptomatic improvements. But the risk that people are always worried about, so the main risk that people worry about is breast cancer. So for the vast majority, under the age of 51, that risk is really almost non-existent. Now, over the age of 51, there is a slight increased risk of breast cancer. We say 0.5 to 1% over and above your background risk. Now, your background risk, if you've got a genetic inherited condition, or you've got a strong family history, or you are overweight, or you smoke, or you drink alcohol, your background risk is already increased. The addition that combined HRT adds is only 0.5 to 1%, so 5 to 10 in 1,000 women. So these are very, very small risks. And the increased risk of womb cancer and ovarian cancer is even lower than that. So as you can see, the fear is often based on outdated info. And if it can have other health benefits, that's why we say that for the vast majority of women, the benefits outweigh the risk. And so, of course, we know that with diabetes, we have increased risk of cardiovascular health complications. So if there's something that might improve insulin resistance, that might reduce cardiovascular risk, it might be worth really considering this for your own health. Now, of course, diabetic medications might need to be reviewed if blood sugar is hard to control, and that's including things like all the different medications that you take, but you might need to add in, and this is the new option of GLP-1 agonists, which may help support metabolic health. So this is the new kid on the block, can be used for diabetes, but also really helps with weight loss, which can also improve some of these insulin resistance and abdominal fat increase that we've talked about in the earlier episode. Aziza, is there anything you want to add?
All I will say in addition is that when you look at the name HRT, just remember that essentially it is replacing. So it's hormone replacement therapy. We're replacing the hormones that we've essentially lost. And that is basically all it is. Because usually people see it as, oh my God, why do I need to take medications for something that happens naturally? But if you view it as, we're not pumping medications into you, we're actually giving you the medication, the hormones that you've lost. That's the side that you need to see. Everything has its risk or benefit. Every medication will have its risk or benefit. And also anything that you have in excess can be harmful, even water. So I think it's really important that we look at the bigger picture and again, we remember that everything is individually based. Just because one person had terrible side effects or they didn't feel any benefit with HRT doesn't mean that you won't, okay? So everything needs to be individually based, and you allow yourselves to at least explore the options that are out there, because you're not supposed to suffer, and absolutely not in silence. And if one thing doesn't work, it doesn't mean that the other won't work. And remembering that there are different forms of HRT, and for some women the patch works better, for them others the oral tablet works. So it's all about understanding the different options that are available to you and allowing yourself to use them so that you can benefit overall.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And sorry, just wanted to add to remember that actually a lot of the modern HRT is body identical and naturally derived. So we have body identical estrogens, and also we have a body identical progesterone as well. So a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want something that's not natural." Well, actually, it's body identical and made from plants, so it's naturally derived. So it is natural. What you're putting, to replace what you've lost.
It's fascinating, and I know that lots of people are going to have lots of questions and people are going to be active in the chat. So we have those foundation 4 pillars. We have the options that healthcare professionals can offer. Is there anything else that we can do?
Oh, the only thing I was going to add is that even if we're giving you the medications as doctors, that does not negate the importance of the 4 pillars that we talked about. The 4 pillars are standard. You need to do that regardless, whether you take medications or not. Please, please, please. Because I feel like within our community, we do that thing with the plaster, okay? So we will put the plaster on, which is the medication, and then we'll do that. We'll rub against the plaster and just make things worse. Please apply the plaster and allow the wound to heal, or essentially our menopausal symptoms to improve through all of the lifestyle changes that lifestyle interventions that we can use.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Aziza, I'm going to let you talk through this because this is something that I feel like you're very, we both advocate, but you're very, very passionate about getting the care that you deserve.
Absolutely. I cannot stress enough that we do deserve good care, good quality, equitable care. What's really important is that we don't normalize the abnormal, because that's something that we as a community do a lot. And it starts from even just periods, where we normalize heavy, painful periods as normal. That is not normal. Please, you don't normalize it yourself, and don't allow your healthcare professional to normalize it as well. Because sometimes you hear stories of patients who go to their GPs and the GP says, "Oh, well, that's, people of your ethnicity, that's what happens." No. Let's not do that, please. You need to push back. If you feel like you're being dismissed, you go back and you tell them, well, this is what I think is wrong with me. In fact, as doctors, we're supposed to do something called ICE. That's what we're taught from med school, which is where I stands for the ideas. We ask you what you think is going on. C is the concerns. What is it that you're worried that it could be? And E is your expectation. What is it that you're hoping that we can achieve? So you can go in armed with that. Tell the doctor, this is what I think it could be. This is what I'm worried about. And this is what I would like, please. If you feel like you're hitting a brick wall, I want you to know that you can see another doctor. You can seek a second or a third or a fourth opinion. I know that it's really frustrating, and I know that you shouldn't feel the need to do that. But sadly, this is the current state that we're in. You do not have to keep seeing the same doctor and having that difficulty. I think it's really important also that you look at the credentials of the doctors that you're seeing. It's quite helpful oftentimes. So if you see that a doctor, if for instance you're going in with a sexual health problem and you see that the doctor has a diploma with the College of Sexual Reproductive Health, then actually, this might be a better doctor for me. And I'm talking about GPs in general, because if you look at us as generalists, some of us have done expert training in different areas, whether it be menopause, diabetes, and so on and so forth. And usually the letters after their name can help with that. It's important that you have tailored care. Tailored, culturally competent care. So you can request care that considers your specific diabetes profile and your cultural background. And we've spoken about this in terms of the treatment options, things that you can do yourself. So if they tell you, oh, just eat a Mediterranean diet, you know that actually, no, you can eat your diet, but make the altered changes and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, whatever your underlying condition is, make sure it's, because sometimes what can happen when you see a doctor, they may not link the diabetes and the menopause and the symptoms that can happen, and also the changes with the medication that may be required. And sometimes you bringing that forward may just trigger that realization, and that can help in the treatment and management plan that you have. And again, we've already spoken about this. We know that the BMI isn't quite accurate for our groups, and it needs to be adjusted. But it's important that we couple that with waist-centered measurements. So making sure, again, that we're looking at the abdominal circumference, because we know that's the area that can be that can grow quite enlarged during menopause. And then that has an impact overall on our insulin resistance and sensitivity. It's important that you make informed decisions. I always tell a patient that ultimately when we see you, it is a shared discussion. Sometimes within our community, there's still that little bit of the paternalistic approach. I try my best to say, look, let's see what your options are. Let's talk and decide together. But sometimes it's, well, whatever you want, doctor. But know that you have the control. You have the autonomy. This is your body. You're the expert of your own body, and you can choose the options that work for you with the doctor. And nobody will force you into taking things that you don't want to take. But if you're not sure why certain medications are given to you or how they work, you can ask the doctor and we can explain it to you. We can explain why this option is better versus that options, and so on and so forth. We ultimately would want to give you what's safest for you. And again, I know we've said this so many times, it's never one size fits all. It's also important that a lot of you have joined this chat, and you've learned a lot, hopefully, from the first session. And I hope you've learned a lot from the second session as well. Knowledge is power. The knowledge that Black women often develop diabetes at lower BMI. So asking for screening, telling your doctor, look, I know my BMI isn't hitting the threshold, but can you do these checks? And you can tell them that the checks that you want to have done, whether it be HbA1c, checking your B12, your folate, your ferritin levels. Often ferritin levels in our communities can be low because we tend to have heavy periods. Knowing what the options are for you can really help you when you're going to see your doctor and when you're going to advocate for yourself to make a difference. So really equip yourself with this knowledge and share it. Share it like confetti, like a sweet to a child, because it could potentially save someone's life.
I always say each one teach one. And I think that sums it up. Ladies, it's been phenomenal again. You've talked us through those 4 pillars of what we can do with our lifestyles to make it more health giving for us as individuals. You've talked us through what healthcare professionals can offer us, added on top of that foundation of those 4 pillars, and how we can then advocate for ourselves in these circumstances. The only other thing I would add is that when we're talking about asking for screening, particularly if you developed what we call gestational diabetes, so diabetes during pregnancy, don't forget, every year minimum, you need to have your blood glucose, your blood sugar checked to see if that is putting you in a pre-diabetes range or if it's putting you in a living with diabetes range. Ladies, there's going to be so many questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Dr. Joan. Thank you, Dr. Aziza and Dr. Itunu. We are joined for the Q&A session by Dr. Isioma Okolo, who was also present for the first part of this series on diabetes and the menopause. I'm searching for Dr. Isioma. She's there. Hi, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Joan. Dr. Isioma, I was wondering whether you wanted to react to that last point made by Dr. Aziza about getting the care you deserve. Don't normalize if symptoms are dismissed, push back, ask for tailored care, reframing waist-centered weight gain is a hormonal symptom, not a personal failure. Is there any of these points that resonated with you and around which you'd like to offer some advice or insights?
Yes, yeah, I think they all resonated, but the one that resonated the most is, it's so sad that we have to really educate people and advise people to advocate for themselves. But this is the reality, especially for Black women, because the data shows that, Black women, Black African Caribbean women, more likely to be dismissed. And what happens actually is, because of the culture of dismissal, we start dismissing ourselves. We start gaslighting our symptoms and just accepting that it's okay to live like this. So, in terms of, I always say there's always 2 experts in the room, you and whichever expert you're seeing, whether that's your GP or your gynecologist or your diabetologist. So you have to show up as an expert in your body, because no matter how many combined decades between Dr. Joan and I, there's no way we will know more about your body than you do. So you have to own it in that way. Knowing your normal is very important. But sometimes, also going in with an advocate, can be helpful, writing things down. And a mnemonic I really love and I share as often as possible is called BRAIN. So if you're trying to make a decision, or perhaps you've gone in and maybe the explanation you've received from the healthcare provider, this doesn't make much sense, you can use BRAIN. So B for benefit, Ask them, okay, what is the benefit of this treatment? R for risk. What is the risk of this treatment you've offered? A for alternatives. What are the alternatives? And then I, very important, is our gut. Our I is intuition. What is my gut telling me? You know, many of us are quite low on fiber, so our gut is really off. But you really have to ask yourself, what is my gut telling me? Even if that's fear, bring that up. And then finally, N, which is doing nothing. Asking your provider, what would happen if I did nothing? What most likely consequence? So I think that's a really good approach to self-advocacy, but coming prepared, really believing you are an expert in your body, and really investing in shared decision making.
This is so profound. Thank you so much, Dr. Isioma. Dr. Joan, I saw you nodding.
Yes, absolutely, because I'm going to share something. Dr. Isioma was part of the webinar series, was it last year, Isioma?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
and I will tell her and I will share with you that I actually wrote down that mnemonic because I think you
Ah,
said that did you say your mum had shared that with you?
yes.
Yes, and I thought that was just the most brilliant mnemonic. So when we say each one teach one, we all can learn. I learned that from Dr. Isioma last year, and I've written it down. It's in my study.
Oh, brilliant. I have to tell my mom.
So I have nothing else to add. It's just to say that. Thank you for sharing. And as I say, we can all learn.
Thank you. And I realized that I did not introduce myself. My name is Greg Trax, and I work with the Diabetes Africa team. We have got lots of people sending little love hearts to what you just said, Dr. Isioma and Dr. Joan. We've got some polls and quizzes that we are running at the same time. So please, if you are on your desktop, they will appear on your screen. If you are following us on your phone, you may have to scroll. Your answers are useful to us, insightful as well. We'd like to know whether what you've learned, whether what you've heard was useful, and also we're asking questions about future episodes. So going back to the questions, perhaps we can step back because not everyone was in the room last week. Could you walk us through, perhaps, Dr. Isioma, about the process of experiencing the menopause whilst living with diabetes? We talked about a great number of symptoms last week, but perhaps as a refresher, how may this how may women experience menopause whilst living with diabetes? What to be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. So, you know, what we know and we learned last week is with the menopause, or as you approach the perimenopause, what's happening is you have a natural decline in hormones, estrogen, progesterone, but also testosterone. Women also have testosterone. And what this is associated with is an increase in insulin resistance. And how that might show up then is that your body's metabolism slows down such that, you know, it's either weight gain or weight redistribution. And what does this mean particularly for somebody? So let's start, for example, if you're pre-diabetic, what that could mean is that could very easily tip you into the phase of being type 2 diabetic. And also what people see potentially with type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes is I guess, a struggle with maintaining what their previous normal was around their glucose management. We also know, taking a step back, that women with type 1 diabetes tend to experience or go into the menopause earlier, and that's for multiple reasons: autoimmunity, chronicity and inflammation, which can impact the ovaries because the ovaries are very sensitive to inflammation. And with regards to the symptoms, people often talk about the hot flushes, hot night sweats. These are vasomotor symptoms, but they're actually not the commonest symptom. But I think something to flag up for patients with diabetes is that it can be a bit of a challenge. You know, is it a hot flush or am I having a hypo? So this is where knowing what your normal is and going back to basics with regards to checking your blood sugar is very, very important. Another way I think it's very important to talk about is the skin changes that happen as we go through the perimenopause and menopause. Estrogen affects every single part of our body. Last week, Dr. Itunu referenced how there were over like maybe 75 symptoms that we know of, right? And with our skin, with skin getting drier and itchy, that can also impact, women with type 1 diabetes with regards to increased risk of things such as skin infections, urinary infections, breaks in the skin that again can predispose you to infections and things like that. And of course, something we don't often talk about is vaginal dryness and the discomfort with that as well. So there's many ways the symptoms can show up. With regards to the change in weight, there's the impact beyond just the cosmetic on your mood, maybe your body confidence. People will often describe, I'm eating exactly the same thing. I'm actually going to the gym more, and yeah, I'm putting on weight. And actually, statistically, on average per year, from when you get through perimenopause to postmenopause, you can put on, people can put on half a kilo to a kilo of weight gain every year, and it varies. So this is very important with regards to what that does to your metabolism and then consequently your bone density and your bone health. Because with increased insulin resistance and challenge with metabolism, you also have this impact with regards to muscle wasting, and then naturally you also will get increased risk of osteoporosis because estrogen is very important for our bones. So this combined effect is, I guess, some of the ways it can show up with women living with diabetes or pre-diabetes.
Thank you. And hence the importance of trying to find solutions, trying to address these symptoms. We've talked about the food, we've talked about exercise, mental health, and also hormonal replacement therapy. To what extent can all of these combine get you back to where you were before, to go back to a sort of normal? What can we expect? Can you perhaps help us manage expectations?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I've seen HRT transform people's lives, and not just people's lives, families, and and couples. I've seen HRT save people from divorce because some people will describe losing their mother or their wife through the perimenopause and menopause phase, because again, something that's often not spoken about is the impact on mood changes, whether this is anxiety or depression, and layer on top of that sleep challenges with insomnia. And then also, people are going through perimenopause and menopause, a stage in your life where you have competing responsibilities and you're meant to be, at whatever peak in your career, whatever that means, and you're looking after children and maybe older parents. So it's very, very challenging. But the impact on the mood is one way. But I've seen it totally transform people. I do think it's very important to set expectations for two reasons. One, HRT is the most evidence-based form of treatment for the menopause, but it's not the only form of treatment. And two things, there are some people who can't have HRT and some people don't want HRT because of the hormonophobia. And my last week was the first time hearing this term hormonophobia, but of course I understand what it means, and it is so real within our community. So with regards to people who approach it with more lifestyle holistic, very, very important. We spoke about the pillars, Dr. Itunu and Dr. Aziza spoke about pillars, very important. And I think the additional benefit of, the non-medical treatment to HRT is with those pillars, this is really you hopefully owning your health a bit more. I see the kind of window between, there's a term called matrescence, when people, it's not formal, I think it's been used more in anthropological circles, when women become mothers. And there's a window between matrescence and menopause, I think is potentially a window of opportunity for extending our healthy lifespan. And the reason it's important, especially for people living with diabetes or pre-diabetes, is most people are not having children or having children later, right? So that window, there's this overlap happening that we have to be aware of. And if, for example, you've had either gestational diabetes or diabetes in pregnancy, there's consequences of that on your metabolism. So I think, again, very, very important to be thinking about things holistically. And I guess in the end, it all depends. For some people, it's life-changing. For some people, it's not that life-changing. But for most people, taking charge of your health with those pillars, you will see some impact. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Isioma. Dr. John, did you want to comment on the expectations?
Just one thing to add. We used to call, and I think I said this last week, we used to call the menopause the change. And I think sometimes it's useful to think about different phases of your life. You are not the same as you were 10 years ago. Inevitably, hopefully, you've grown, um, and you've learnt and you've experienced. So I think an expectation of what we used to say, in that terrible time of COVID, the new normal. You have a new normal. So I would not expect to be the same as I was 5, 10 years ago. So whether it's the 4 pillars that we're using, whether it's HRT we're using to help us through this phase of perimenopause, menopause, there will be a new version of you, a different version of you as you go through the different phases of your life. And that's for men and women and me, for everybody. So let's have that expectation that, yes, we want to thrive. Yes, we want to be full of health, but it's not necessarily the health in the same package as it was 5, 10 years ago.
Thank you. Dr. Isioma, are you okay to do a round of quick fire questions from the audience?
Sure,
Is
yes.
it safe to take supplements for menopause whilst someone is on insulin?
I guess it depends on what you mean by supplements. Because, I used to think supplements, I would call supplements simple things like vitamin D, magnesium, but actually the other week somebody referenced a herbal remedy called St. John's wort as a supplement. So I think it depends on what you're calling a supplement. So you have things like I reference vitamin D, calcium, magnesium, omega-3, these are pretty safe and we know they don't really impact your diabetic or HRT medication, but we know that some people who would call supplements such as herbal remedies like St. John's wort, red clover, or other what are called isoflavones or plant estrogens like soy and, for example, black cohosh. The evidence base isn't particularly strong, but we also know that some of these medications or supplements, as some people call them, can impact medicines you're on. So I think you just have to, if you're starting any supplement, I think the best thing to do is to double check that with your care provider and just check there's no interactions.
What about hormonal replacement therapy and insulin?
So your hormonal replacement therapy, there's no direct interaction with them. What I will say though is obviously there's no direct interaction with the insulin and HRT. What I will say, just because it was brought up in the presentation, is make a point around these drugs called GLP-1s, which are used by people with diabetes, but also nowadays very commonly used people who don't have diabetes and using it in the context of weight loss. So very, very important. In my clinic, 1 in 3 women are on these medications, GLP-1s, common names are like Mounjaro, Ozempic, and they can affect HRT because, especially if you are using oral HRT, because some of these medicines will impact how quickly food goes through your body. So in terms of how much HRT you're absorbing, we're not sure. So the advice, if you're on such medications, is to try and swap to a non-oral form of HRT, so through the skin, and some people use a intrauterine coil, for example, or to really think about adjusting the dose of the progestogen in your HRT. I call, when it comes to HRT, I call estrogen good cop, progesterone bad cop. Estrogen does all the wonderful things, makes things thicker, sharpens your mind, helps you sleep better, but sometimes gets a bit carried away. And progesterone is there to calm estrogen down. But if you have too much estrogen, it will also cause excessive thickening of the womb lining. And this can increase the risk of womb cancer. So for HRT, GLP-1 drugs in context of diabetes and non-diabetes, be sure that you're on the right preparation of HRT, is what I would say.
Thank you for the very comprehensive answer. Can one start HRT after 15 years of menopause?
Mm. You can, and I say you can because you can do anything. There, people are hesitant. There's hesitancy around starting HRT later in life, and the main reason for that is if you're starting HRT later in life, what we know is the stroke later in life anyway, with or without HRT, our stroke risk increase. right? And we know that one of the risks of HRT is blood clots and increased stroke risk, particularly if you are high personal or medical risk. So I think there's a bit of hesitancy around it. I have seen it being done, but it's again on an individualized basis. And there has to be a balance of the benefits and the risks. You know, what are the benefits in terms of real life quality of improving benefits, and what are the risks, and what are you happy, what, you know, how much risk are you happy to hold in that situation? So it all depends, but it's more the stroke risk that's a concern.
Can I just add? Dr. Isioma has given a really comprehensive answer, and I think the only thing I would add is that it depends at what point, at what age your menopause started, because we do know that it can occur in some women at a very early age, and we would normally recommend, as Dr. Aziza said during the episode, replacement treatment. So it may be that your menopause was so early that even 15 years afterwards, your risk may not be the risk that we were talking about as you get older. Does that make sense? Because your menopause started at a very young age.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And a question for everyone in the audience. Would you recommend the Diabetes Africa event to a friend or colleague? What was your favorite aspect of the event? You can answer these questions in the polls and quizzes that we are running at the moment. Thank you so much for this. Another question, quick in part of our, I called it quick fire questions, but it's good that we have detailed answer. We love your answers, Dr. Isioma. Please carry on. Everyone is absolutely enjoying this and learning so much. Are Black women more likely to develop diabetes during the menopause?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. You know, I don't know the answer to that based on research, but if I were to, you know, use related research, I would guess potentially yes, for multiple reasons, right? One, because of, you know, the changes we've said that happen biologically through the menopause with regards to increasing insulin resistance, metabolic changes, weight gain. And we know that Black women for a lower, I don't I'll use Dr. Jones' words. BMI is a blunt tool. There are better things. I am not a fan of BMI, but we know for lower BMI, Black women are more likely to develop diabetes and other conditions like hypertension, actually. So I would say yes. And then add on top of that, if you missed last week's talk, please go back and definitely watch it on the YouTube. It was a brilliant presentation. Dr. Itunu and Dr. Aziza spoke at length about this thing called allostatic load, which is essentially the burden of being a Black person and a Black woman in this world, existing in a world that wasn't meant for you. That stress of existing actually has impact on our biology. It's called biological weathering. It shortens your DNA, your telomeres, and increases your chance of, I guess, whole body inflammation and disease progression. So I would guess yes because of all those factors. But I've not actually seen any research to support that. But I'd guess yes. I don't know what you think, Dr. Joan.
I agree. I mean, I think, despite the unfortunate spike in new diagnosis of people living with diabetes at a type 2 diabetes at a younger age now, which we're seeing, the vast majority tend to be diagnosed in these sort of 30s, 40s, 50s. And my suspicion, because as you say, we don't have that evidence to back it up, but lack of evidence doesn't mean that it doesn't actually occur, is that from the perimenopause, that may be the thing that tips women into living with type 2 diabetes or into being living with pre-diabetes. That is my impression. And we know that this perimenopause in women of African Caribbean heritage starts earlier. So, that I think is tied in as well.
Definitely an area where we should encourage more research then.
Yeah, absolutely. But we need people to fund research.
Thank you. Thank you also to everyone in the room for participating in the polls that we are running. The last question is whether you'd like us to register you for future events in the series. And so please let us know. Next week, we will be covering, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Joan, PCOS and contraception. Is that correct?
Yeah, polycystic ovarian syndrome and contraception, with the wonderful Dr. Itunu and Dr. Aziza as well.
Thank you so much. We've had a few questions coming our way. If you've got something, I'm speaking to the participants. If you've got anything to ask, please don't hesitate. This is your last chance. We'll perhaps close with one more question that came our way, perhaps a way to also summarize or talk about what we've spoken about, but in a different way. What's the biggest challenge? And this question goes to Dr. Isioma as well as Dr. Joan. What's the biggest challenge in diabetes management when women are going through menopause? In your opinion or in your practice, what's the thing that's the hardest?
That's a good question.
I would say the confusion. Because actually sometimes it's not obvious that the person is in the perimenopause, not immediately obvious because it's a phase, isn't it? It's not a one day they're not perimenopausal or menopausal and another day they are. I know it's a retrospective diagnosis, but what I'm saying for that person living through those symptoms, it's a process. It evolves. It manifests and shows itself over a period of time. So sometimes there's a confusion because a woman may be doing the same things that she was doing before, eating the same, moving the same, living the same, but her blood glucose levels are not reacting the same. And those hormonal changes are starting, and the woman herself and we as healthcare professionals aren't able to recognize that at the beginning sometimes. So sometimes it's a confusion. And that can be the way the confusion looks, but it can also be I'm doing the same things, I'm eating the same things, moving the same way. How do I get my blood glucose to now react? Okay, I recognize now I'm in the perimenopause because they might have developed hot flushes or something. What do I do now? So confusion in this way now. What do I need to do as an individual in order to get things to my new normal, as we said earlier on? So confusion is the way I would describe it. That's the most challenging thing for the person themselves, for us as healthcare professionals, because as we've said, it's not one size fits all. We've got these tools and we need to utilize those tools and facilitate and empower that person to live their most healthy life. But for each individual, that's going to require different elements.
Yeah. Yeah,
Dr.
I would definitely
Isioma?
agree. Yeah, I think that's spot on. I don't think I can add much to that at all. And building on the confusion, I think probably a different side of the coin, which is the impact on, I guess, one's mental health because of, there's obviously the physical and biological things happening. And of course, we know menopause, perimenopause can impact your mental health. But I think because of the relative silence in women's health and the isolation, and I wonder if there's just this additional stressor with regards to, men age gracefully and men are like, what's that term? It's like they become like silver foxes, but women disappear. Women disappear as we get older. And so I wonder if there's that social cognitive load on your mind that can also make it very challenging. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Isioma. Where do we go if we are looking for more information? Can you give us a few pointers or ideas, Dr. Isioma?
Well, you definitely have to go and watch this video back and look at the Diabetes Africa website. That's a must. And there's also often very useful resources linked. A really good website that I often go to myself is the British Medical Society. There's segments for, patient information leaflets, around menopause care. I know that Dr. Itunu, who's one of the speakers here, she speaks a lot and writes a lot around menopause. So you should definitely follow her on social media if you don't. I occasionally put stuff about menopause as well on my website, so you can certainly look at that. I recently wrote a blog around Mounjaro, matrescence, and menopause, actually. But I think the BMS is a really useful resource as well as Diabetes Africa because they make these chunk size videos and infographics to help people understand risk. So in terms of, the fears people have maybe around hormonophobia and HRT, again, that can be addressed. Any questions people have around supplements that are herbal remedies, that can be addressed as well. So those are the spaces I would recommend you check out. But first, check out Diabetes Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Isioma, and thank you, Dr. Joan. Thanks to everyone in the room.
Greg,
Absolutely, please.
I would also say, sorry, apologies. Your healthcare provider, it's likely to be your GP. Please go and see them because NICE, which everybody knows, has actually produced some decision-making support. So some nice infographics there that your GP or GP surgery healthcare professional can use with you to demonstrate, in 100 people, if you're not, let's say, for example, using HRT, this many people may get breast problems. But if you are using HRT, additional this many people, and sometimes seeing it can be really helpful. So yeah, don't forget your round the corner primary healthcare provider.
Thank you, Dr. John. Before I give you the final words to you and Dr. Isioma, this episode and all of our episodes are available on our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/@diabetesafrica. We are 3 subscribers away from reaching 5,000 on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Why is it important? Because it gives the channel more visibility and it gives other people a chance to come across this content. So as the saying goes, please subscribe and follow us. Thank you so much. The floor is yours, Dr. Joan.
So I just want to say a huge thank you to Diabetes Africa. Yes, YouTube channel is available. For doing such a professional job of producing this webinar series. I want to say thank you to Dr. Itunu and Dr. Aziza for all the information that they shared in the episode, and really, really grateful to the wonderful Dr. Isioma Okolo for answering all the questions just so comprehensively, with so much wisdom, with so much knowledge, with so much experience. Because I noticed you said about the decades between you and I, Isioma. So yes, lots of decades of experience and knowledge there. And thank you so much for answering all the questions. I want to say thank you to the participants. And I want to say thank you to you all for taking part in it. We learn together. As I said to you, I've written down what Dr. Isioma's mum shared with her and she shared with us last year. So wishing you a wonderful evening. Please, we will be here again next week talking about polycystic ovarian syndrome and contraception. So there is yet more to learn. There is so much more to learn. We are all still learning. So wishing you a good evening and saying thank you very much. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody.
Thank you.